You're tuned in to The Andrew Lawton Show.
We've talked on the show in the past about how Aylmer, Ontario, the small town in southwestern Ontario, has become this hotbed in the fight for freedom, where overzealous bureaucrats, public health officials, municipal officers are butting up against an increasingly large group of protesters that are criticizing masks, criticizing lockdown, and the government has had a very precarious relationship with respecting free speech in this regard. And a lot of it has come down to one very notable example early in the lockdown, back in April, when a drive-in church service became the target of the Aylmer police, who eventually backed off, and it actually led to the whole episode, the government specifically saying drive-in services are fine. But the church in question was the Church of God in Aylmer, led by Pastor Henry Hildebrandt, who's become very vocal on religious freedom and also resisting lockdown. And most notably, this past week, Pastor Hildebrandt received a letter from Southwestern Public Health, which is the local public health unit, requesting that he shut down the church for 28 days on a voluntary basis. Now, as you might be able to expect, his answer has been no, but I still want to talk about this letter. Pastor Hildebrandt joins me on the line now. Pastor, good to talk to you again. Thanks for coming on today.
Andrew, good to have me again.
You've been talking for months now about these issues, and I know a lot of people are very grateful. I know you've had quite an international following build up around your commentary on this. Tell me what your feeling was when you got this letter from the Southwestern Public Health.
I was quite surprised. It arrived in my email inbox on the 17th, and then I looked at the letter, and it said this is effective as of the 17th, which seemed rather strange that you get the letter and it's effective right away. I assumed at that point, that every pastor in our area received it. Of course, it was addressed to me, but I figured that everyone else would have gotten a similar letter, only to find out later on to this point, all I can find out is I'm the only one that received it. So I was surprised that it seemed rather strange.
I just want to read a section of this letter to those tuning in. Southwestern Public Health is recommending that your church, along with others where we are seeing an increased risk in exposure to COVID-19, voluntarily cease in-person church services and all in-person gatherings for 28 days, beginning, as you note, November 17th. It says later on, the purpose of this closure is to prevent the gathering of your church members with people outside their own household, to protect them from being exposed to COVID-19. This will help to prevent the further spread of COVID-19 within the broader community and help protect those who are the most vulnerable to severe illness. Has there ever been, to your knowledge, a case of COVID-19 within your church? Because when they say communities where there's a high risk, they're saying that your church is a high risk for COVID-19.
There has been none at all, Andrew.
So what is the justification that you think they're using?
It's a really tough one. I just do not know, because we have so there's been 5 deaths altogether in Elgin, Oxford all year. 5 deaths, and of course every death is tragic, but there's been 5 deaths. Like we were just saying, there's no cases in Aylmer or Malahide connected to our church. I just do not know what the justification is. I read the letter again and again. I do not know, and of course there's no facts attached to the letter. The word pandemic is not in there in the letter. I don't know what the what was the urge, or what's behind the letter.
I reached out to the public health agency, and they said that several churches, they didn't give a list, but they said several churches received this, and they said that attending church where there may be singing, talking, and long periods of sitting or standing in close proximity are higher risk situations for the spread of COVID-19. The issue that I have with this is that we have now had 8 months to adapt practices to make things a bit safer, not just in church, but in grocery stores, in all institutions, and it seems like we've had a fair bit of success in that. So I don't understand, when the provincial government's advice is that churches can open safely, why a local health agency is trying to get you to shut down for a month.
That's the thing, Andrew, is there's been no nothing coming from the premier. There's no law in place right now to shut down churches at all. We, as our church here, we are very, very careful when it comes to things, not just now with the COVID-19, but whether it was whooping cough or whatever could have come up in the past. We have always been and are now very, very careful, so as not to prevent or not to spread anything. So I don't understand. And like I said, I have not heard of other churches. We did check. We have not yet found who else got it. And once we find them, we will know. But at this point, all I know is that I have the letter.
When I see a request like this, I see it as a violation of religious freedom. Telling a church, even voluntarily, to shut down is something that you would never see done, in my view anyway, to other religious groups. You'd never see a business told, hey, I think you don't have to, but it would be nice if you closed down for a month. I've had people that have responded to me since I first wrote about this yesterday saying, well, it's just a request. It's just a question. There's no obligation. What's your response to that?
Andrew, the longer I think about this letter, the stranger it seems to me what happened here, because the wording is okay. So first of all, I would say the letter was respectfully written. Okay, but look at the content. It's saying this closure is to prevent church members. So a pastor is asked if he would voluntarily do something to prevent the church members from gathering. It's at its best very, very strange and very wrong. It's just the whole approach is not appropriate. I find it very offensive.
And again, I've made this point to people. If the government is telling you to do something, even if it's quote unquote just a request, there is an inherent coercive effect to that. The state is telling you not to worship. The state is telling you your church should close its doors.
Right, exactly. And which is not the case here. Not the case here. It's a local health unit saying that based on what they feel or what they think, and they're not referring to deaths, they're not referring to an emergency because there is none. What is? I called them yesterday, left them a message. They haven't returned my call yet. My only question I have is, what was behind this? Just tell me what's your burden? What are you referring to?
Yeah, and you pointed this out when you spoke at your church on, I believe it was Thursday evening. They say that you can continue to have drive-in religious gatherings, and they, quote, discourage the idling of engines, unquote. Now, when I was attending my church in drive-in form earlier this summer, it was not too bad. You could roll down the windows. You've got people that in Aylmer have horse and buggy that have no heaters. You've got people in cars in December as the weather is getting a little bit cooler. The idea of sitting in your car in December in Southern Ontario without idling an engine is not exactly a viable alternative to worshiping.
Andrew, that's why I told them straight out, as you heard me say on Wednesday night, absolutely have your engines idling, because I don't want no little ones to be cold in there, and the mothers and everyone else. So I just found it rather humorous that in the letter, at the end of the letter, they're suggesting to me that we could continue having drive-in services. I have heard of drive-in services before, Andrew. They did come up earlier this year, so I am familiar with drive-in services, as you know. So I thought that's rather humorous that at the end of the letter they have to introduce me to drive-in services and tell me how to have them. We are quite familiar with drive-in services. We have done them for the past 8 months, and I do not need a local health unit to tell me that is allowed. I fought for it. We won the case. The Premier changed the law in Ontario in our favor. So I am familiar with drive-in services.
I know you said you haven't actually spoken to the health unit since getting this letter, but I have to ask you, Pastor, where do you go from here? Because I know that with what you're saying about not being able to identify any other churches that have received this letter, and with in general, I'd say how you and your church have been treated by various levels of government going back to April now. Where do you go when you get something like this? What's your path forward?
So first of all, I would like to know, is this intimidation? Is this an attempt to intimidate us? If it was, it failed. It doesn't intimidate us at all. We are going forward as we have until now. There has been nothing issued for this area that churches need to close. So nothing changes. And until they return my call and explain to me what the issue is here, nothing changes. We're going on as we have.
And that was actually an interesting point that you just reminded me of. The letter says that someone will follow up with you, and you indicated that sure enough you had received, I think it was a voicemail from someone from the health unit.
That's right. They had left a message at our church phone. So then I returned that call yesterday morning from my home phone and left them my number so that they could reach me, but I have not heard from them yet. Until I hear from them, like I said, my main thing is I have no questions. There's nothing that needs to be explained because there is nothing that is going on right now. But what I want to know from them is, please tell me what is the motive of this letter, just so there is so we understand what it is.
And I guess I would ask you then, what would it mean if they were to kind of provide you a list of all the other churches that received it? If they said, well, it wasn't just you, it was all of these places, would that change your concerns with the letter?
So if they tell me that the others got it as well, that definitely changes. Then it doesn't seem like a personal attack or a personal attempt to intimidate. That would definitely change that part of it.
Because I will say, and again, I don't have a list. The health agency says that several churches got it. Now, from my perspective, that doesn't really change all that much, because I feel that we have to go with the evidence on this. And this is a point that you raised earlier. If there's a church that's causing problems, a church that's causing some sort of an outbreak, then deal with that. But my issue here is that we already have guidelines. There are already restrictions on how churches can operate that are meant to make sure they aren't places where COVID-19 is being transmitted. So I don't know why a shutdown is necessary.
Yes, and from that perspective, nothing would change. Even if they said other churches had gotten the letter, nothing would change that way, because there's no outbreak. There's nothing happening, and I don't appreciate that Aylmer is put into that light. That it comes across as that what all is going on here, when we're not aware of anything that's going on.
That's actually very important, Pastor, because there are a lot of people across the country that had never heard of Aylmer before now. And I literally get emails from people in British Columbia and Alberta that are asking me about Aylmer because they know it's not far from me in London. And this is how they're learning about the community, going back to when police were filming your drive-in services in, I think it was April, to when we had the government going after the anti-lockdown protests. And this is how your community is now being showcased to a lot of people.
And Andrew, that's the thing. If we go back 8 months back to the spring, people accuse me and they say, well, why are you putting Aylmer in the spotlight? Let me remind everyone that it's not me doing it, because we were doing our things in the drive-in service earlier this year, and the police came by and they said, thumbs up, all looks good. Then they rocked the boat, and now we're same situation again. So we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and I get this letter based on what? So then I have no respond letter and let everybody know, because we have a lot of followers, not just here in Aylmer. There's thousands of people following us worldwide, so they want to know what is going on. So I have to post a letter. I don't know why the letter was written. I guess they felt it was good enough just to write a letter instead of making a phone call and saying, Pastor, we are singling you out, or we're not. Just tell me what you're doing so that we can go on from here. But there seems to be very, very little effort put into communicating from any level of people out there, just taking it for granted that we will get an email and that I, as the pastor, would then proceed to shut the church down and prevent the people from gathering. That's not the case.
So lest there be any doubt at all, the answer to the question of will you shut down is a resounding no.
It's a resounding no. There's no way that a pastor would volunteer to say, I will go ahead. I was invited to do this. I will go ahead and shut the church doors so that the members cannot meet. That would be very wrong.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And God bless you, Pastor Henry Hildebrandt of the Church of God. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for having me again.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.